Hey guys, how's it going? CoreData here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different and we're going to be reviewing the full set of Early War. So yes, we finally have the full set of cards for Early War, so I can finally give my my full opinions on everything that has been revealed so far. Each nation is getting 4 cards, I do believe, and then the ally nations are each getting 1 card each. And I will be giving these cards a star rating. I probably won't have any graphics on the thing this time around because I'm working on a very, very tight schedule to get this video out ahead of the set release. However, the star rating is going to be between 1 and 5 stars, naturally. 1 stars are just bad cards in general, cards that likely will not see even experimentation. 2-star cards are cards that will probably be tried out and tested in a handful of decks and then fall off. 3-star cards are going to make their way into probably like tier 3 and tier 2 decks. 4-star cards are just solid cards for tier 1 and tier 2 decks. And 5-star cards are just nation staples or very, very potent cards for very particular decks. I also want to say that I'll be keeping these this review relatively concise. I'm not going to be talking too much about the cards in general. I have some thoughts that I'm going to be sharing, but for the most part, I'm just going to give you guys a rough breakdown of my overall opinions on each of the cards relatively quickly, because I don't want this video to be an hour or 2 hours long, because it very easily could be. And I will be going through this alphabetically, nation by nation, lowest rarity to highest rarity. So we'll be starting off with Britain, and we're going to be taking a look at their standard card, and that is the Bleeders. The Bleeders is a 1-cost, 1-op, 1/1 with guard, gets +1/+1 when you play a card with bond. This I'm gonna immediately just say this is a 2-star card. This is gonna see a little bit of experimentation at the very start of the patch, and I don't see this going anywhere. Unfortunately, it being a 1-cost 1/1 is just not good enough as far as like 1-drop cards go. Compare this to things like cavalry regiments, compared to Comb, compared to some of the new 1-drops that we're getting in this set as well. It's just not good enough as a baseline. It dies to sickle, also suppression sucks. If this was a 1/2, maybe there'd be an outside chance for it. But then you have the other side of it as that it's relying on bond cards to scale, and bond cards are already a very, like, it's a subset of very mediocre cards in general, just to like make this card like try to present any real threat. So I don't think it's going to be good enough. Like I said, it's probably going to see a little bit of experimentation at the start of the patch because there is a number of bond support pieces in this set. So we're probably going to see it tested out a little bit before inevitably it falls off. Next up, we have, while I cycle, we have the Defiant Mark 1. It is a 2-cost, 1-op, 2/2 fighter with bond. Has +2 attack on your turn if you deployed a British infantry last turn. So Defiant is it's an interesting card. It's a semi-reasonable aggro aircraft. The issue is it doesn't fit into like any current aggro deck. Air doesn't really run infantry to support this at all, and the one deck that this would have in theory fitted into, which was buffs, is no longer Brit main. It's now US main Brit ally, which means you don't have card slots to slot this in. As a 4/2 from the support line that attacks every turn, it's like not bad, but it also relies on you playing other like Brit infantry, which are not great. Buffs is like the best infantry, and then you obviously have like garrison and frontier forces and whatnot in Middlesex. But there's not enough support for this. It's just in a very weird spot, this card. This is also a 2-star card. Likely going to see a little bit of experimentation, but will fall off pretty quickly. Again, it's got bond in it, might be relevant with the elite from the set, but likely won't be. Next up, we have the 25-pounder Mark 1. This is a 4-cost, 2-op, 2/3 artillery. At start of your turn, this and adjacent ground units get +1/+1. Yeah, it's immediately 4k for a 2/3 artillery is like not good. Compare this to something like Calliope, where you're playing Calliope primarily because it has a very good deployment effect. This you're paying for a 2/3 that has a delayed payoff. And the fact that there's no decks that really want to pay for a 2/3 arty that like slowly scales each turn, it's just going. I don't think this is even going to see experimentation 1 star. Yeah, I think this is probably the worst card of the set, which is unfortunate because we don't get very many artillery pieces printed these days, so it's a shame that the one they have printed, I think this is the only RT in the set, the one they have printed for the set is hot garbage. And finally for Britain, we have Your Courage. This is a 3-cost order, reduced the cost of cards with bond in hand by 1. Then your bond units everywhere get +1/+1. So this is a very interesting card for supporting bond. And it's a very, very potent effect. Mass credit cheating like this is usually very, very good alongside like the +1/+1 to bond units in hand, deck, and in play. Is like, it's a big stat bump. And Britmain is like the de facto sort of nation for bond because it's like the highest density of playable bond cards. Thanks to things like Raf Mustang, you've got the Valentines, you've got King's African Rifles, and there's other things you could be running like the Defiant Mark 1 from the new set, and the Bleeders also technically synergize. But the issue is like there's not that many bond units that you actively want to run outside of like the Valentine, the Mustang, that you're not going to be getting as big of a stat bump as you think you are, unless you're like branching into other nations such as Germany. Germany is getting a very, very powerful bond 1-drop that we might talk about, or that might make its way into this deck. So we might like see a Brit Germany aggressive bond deck maybe take shape, but I really, really doubt it. It's a really interesting card, and it does a lot for bond, and if they print more bond cards in the future, this does get exponentially better as they print more bond. But I don't think this is going to make it. I don't think this is going to change how good bond is as a like an entire deck archetype. But if bond does become a deck, this is going to obviously be a very cornerstone elite for the deck, which is why it's going to be a 3-star card. Yeah, I just struggle to see it being like higher than low tier 2 if it does take shape. Next up is Germany, and again we're going to start off with the standard, and that is going to be 18th Infantry Regiment. This is a 1-cost 1-up 2/2 with bond and shock. It's an infantry. Deployment moves into the front line if possible. This is the 1-drop I was alluding to when I was speaking about your courage. Again, because your courage doesn't actually specify Brit bond cards, it just cares that cards have bond, which means it will discount cards from other nations as well as give them +1/+1 if they're units or whatever. So something to bear in mind just in relation to that card. But again, yeah, this is a very, very, very good 1-drop. This is probably one of the best 1-drops I've seen in a little while, since probably Comb. It does have bond, so you are paying an extra life for this on turn 1, but it does move itself in the front line, so the op cost doesn't necessarily feel as bad. It's roughly equal on like credit economy as Comb is. Its biggest, like, Comb is its biggest competition by far, but the upside is this doesn't necessarily throw off your curve as badly as Comb does. It moves to the front line, you don't necessarily have to operate at that turn, and you can still play a 2-drop, whereas Comb, you're always locked into just 1 credit. So this leaves you the flexibility of your turn 2. But Comb is getting nerfed in the upcoming balance patch alongside the set. So Comb is going to be a 2/2, which means this does trade into the Comb relatively evenly, which is a benefit to you more so than it is to the player that played the Comb. And while Comb is Comb is no longer going to be the 1-drop of the format, which means we're going to be seeing like some more 1-drops make their way into play, most likely. But yeah, I do think we're going to see quite a bit of 18th Infantry. This is likely going to slot into a number of faster and more tempo-based German decks, as well as decks like Heinz, Combined Arms, which is something they're trying to push as well this expansion, I believe. So yeah, just a very, very powerful card, 4 stars. And speaking of faster German decks, we move on to the Panzer 1A. This is a 1-cost 1-up 1/2 with tank with deployment, draw card if you control infantry. Goes hand in hand with the 18th Infantry Regiment. Yeah, this is a pretty strict upgrade for a pretty specific deck, which is exactly Heinz. And this is an upgrade for very specifically the Front and Homeland variant of Heinz, the more combo-centric version of Heinz that I've showcased on the channel before, and that a number of players played in the World Championships. You don't necessarily run all that many infantry in the deck, but you could, in theory, slot in 18th Regiment as an early game anti-aggro tool that also enables your Panzer 1As as well as your Jaeger regiments, obviously. But the hope is that this finally gets people to pivot away from the 38T, which I think has been bad for quite a while. But people still insist on running it because it cycles. At least now you have a cheap tank that cycles that also can cost 0 under Front and Homeland, which is very, very good. Again, that cares a lot about 0-cost cycles. So this is a huge upgrade for specifically Front and Homeland Heinz. And I do believe this is going to be a 4-star card. Next up, we have Kradschützen, 36 Kradschützen. Christ. This is a 2-cost 1-up 1-4 infantry. When a friendly German unit moves into the front line, give it +1 attack and a -1 operation cost. This is a very, very interesting card. And again, like, it maybe can make its way into Heinz. I don't think this is good enough for the front and homeland Heinz deck. I think this is more catered towards the like classic mid-range / tempo versions of Heinz. The reason I think this isn't as good in Heinz as I think people hope it is because the op cost cheating is nowhere near as good as a lot of Svard. It does give you the +1 attack similar to like combat engineers in the US, and like the problem is it's an effective. It's only effectively halving the op cost of your tanks, right? Or anything you move to the front line. Whereas Svard, you're paying 2k to discount everything in play. This, you're paying 2k to have them, so you get to move them and then they're free after that for the attack. So you're paying to push them and then the attack is free. So yeah, I'm not sold on this. I don't think this is good enough for the Homeland Heinz. I think you're always playing Svard in that deck. It might be good enough in like tempo / mid-range Heinz, like the more value-based version of the deck that isn't playing front and Homeland, but I'm not entirely sure. But if there is like a mid-range or tempo deck, like a slightly lower to the ground German deck, this will probably see some amount of play inside in it. I do believe this is a 3-star card. Oh my god, I'm tripping over words. And finally, we have Conquest. So Conquest is a 2-credit order. Draw a card for each unit type you control. This, I'm just going to say straight away, I'm putting this down as a 5-star card. I think this is arguably the best card of the set and the most straightforward card. It will pretty much always be a 2-credit draw 2 in the majority of decks. Germany is one of the nations that has like the easiest time sticking multiple unit types because they have so many good units of each type. Like turn 1, turn 2, you're playing your Rados, you're playing some like infantry, you're playing a handful of tanks. Like when you're playing Germany, you will frequently have an Arado and maybe like a Panzer 4H or like a Schutzen or a the 3-2 that gives you production. You'll have something. You'll frequently have very consistently 2 unit types in play, so this just becomes 2-credit draw 2 90% of the time. And in fringe cases, you're going to have 3 unit types, which is 2-credit draw 3, which is insane in a nation that has not got card draw and has historically struggled for card draw. So yeah, I think this is likely going to end up being a super staple, wow, words, for Germany moving forward, as long as it's in the format. Yeah, draw being Germany's biggest weakness is somewhat helped by the existence of Conquest, even if, like, yeah, the fact that this will frequently just be a 2-credit draw 2 is frequently just a land girls with pretty much no downside. Yeah, it requires board presence, which could be seen as a downside, but it's not something Germany struggles to do. So yeah, the easy 5-star. We're going to see a ton of Conquest, I think, while it's in the format. Moving on to Japan, we have the Oida Regiment. This is a 2-cost 1-op 1-3 infantry with Blitz. Gets +1/+1 when a destruction effect triggers. Japan's getting a very interesting set of cards this expansion. So they're getting a number of cards that care about destruction effects, or at least a couple of cards that care about destruction effects. Oida is interesting. I don't think it's good enough to see play. It's likely going to see a little bit of experimentation when the set drops, again, because destruction effects are a supported theme for Japan right now. The problem is, similarly to Bleeders, it takes too long to get rolling. It has one thing going for it, which is the fact that it's symmetrical. It doesn't care whose destruction effect it is. It just cares that destruction effects are happening, which means that, like, versus very specific decks, this might trigger a handful of extra times. If you're playing like a Japan Mirror, they're playing like Shuffle. Their Sasebos are giving you +1/+1 now, I guess. But like, I don't think it's enough to make the card playable. Again, likely going to see a little bit of testing when the set comes out with some of the new destruction effect stuff, but likely not going to stick around, so I think this is a pretty easy 2-star card. Next up, we have the Kawasaki Key 10. This is a card I think that's gone a little bit under the radar. It's a 1-cost 1-up 1-2 fighter. It gets +1 attack until end of turn after you attack with a Japanese unit. Now, the way this is templated, I do believe this will continue to scale, so as you attack with Japanese units, this will keep increasing its attack. Yeah, I think this card's a little bit underrated. I think it's a little bit slept on. It has the potential. It has the potential for like a lot of output for not a lot of investment. it's a 1k 1-2 fighter, which isn't like great by any stretch, but we have been seeing the 1 credit 1-2 Fiat that comes on as a 2-2 see a lot of play. And like in theory, this has a much higher ceiling than the Fiat for a little bit of extra work. So I wouldn't be surprised if this saw a little bit of play, or if it ended up being like all right, because I wouldn't be surprised if this hits the board, goes unanswered, and kills you on like turn 4, turn 5. But this is very much like a hyper aggro card. This cares exclusively about just going into the like fastest, most aggressive Japan deck you can think of. But yeah, I don't think it's going to stick. I don't think it's going to be crazy. I think it's probably going to make its way into maybe a tier 3 deck. So for that, I am giving it 2 stars. Next up, we have the Infantry Regiment, the 73rd Infantry Regiment, rather. It's a 6-cost, 1-up, 6/5 deployment. Trigger the destruction effects of all friendly units destroyed since the start of your last turn. So starting off with a 6k, 6/5 infantry with no keywords in Japan is already like unplayable most of the time in Japan, but this card does have a saving grace in the fact that it doesn't care about the nation of the destruction effects it's triggering. And also it's important to note like the timing window that this cares about. It's since the start of your last turn, which means it's your previous turn. So any destruction effects are triggered on your previous turn, on your opponent's turn, and your current turn. So that's a 3-turn window where it cares about the destruction effects that are triggering. I think this card has like an outside chance of forming a destruction effect deck. This is the exact type of effect that destruction effects have been looking for, and it does work with things like Elephant Boys and Jungle Warfare, which is also very, very important to note. I wouldn't be surprised to see like Japan Soviet or Soviet Japan destruction effects kind of try to materialize a little bit, because the Soviets have a number of very, very good destruction effects, like particularly like slightly earlier on the curve, things like your Chaika, for example, Illusion IL-10, another very, very good option for this. You have the Yaks, and there's like a couple of other things that this synergizes really, really well with in Soviet. You also have the option to run like Rush plus Out with the Old if you're doing the Chaika thing. So there is, I think, room for this to maybe spawn a deck, because the fact that this has like a 3-turn grace period of where it's like looking for destruction effects, it means a lot. So yeah, I think this has the potential to actually actively spawn the destruction deck, and for that reason I'm giving it 3 stars. And finally, we have Swift Victory. This is a 1-credit order, deal 3 damage. Units in the enemy deck get +3 attack. So Swift Victory is pretty straightforward. I've not got too much to say on this. It's going to see play in aggro. It's going to see play in burn at just 1k, deal 3 damage to the HQ. We've seen cards like Carrier Battle and Air Blitz see play in the past, and this is pretty much just a strictly better version of those effects. The downside for this, giving +3 to enemy units, +3 attack to enemy units in deck, doesn't really matter in a lot of cases. In a lot of like popular matchups, it's not going to matter at all. Things like versus super slow control, it's not going to really matter at all. And in aggro and in mid-range mirrors, it's not going to matter. Like, you have 2 to 3 turns before it starts to really bite you. So yeah, this card I think is a very easy 4-star. It's going to see play in pretty much every aggressive Japan deck from here until it rotates. Just a solid piece of burn. So next up we have Soviets, and we're starting off with the 132nd Omsk. So this is a 2-cost 1-up 1/2 with Ambush and Blitz. Got 2 keywords, important for soup. Deployment gets +1/+1 for each of your units with 2 or more combat keywords. So yeah, like I said, it's another piece of soup for the soup deck. I don't think it's going to be good enough to see play in the soup deck. I do think even with the nerf on its way to Comb, I think Comb is just likely a better card in general to be playing over this. I don't think if you're playing soup you really care about this having +1/+1 or +2/+2, because you're not playing this until the mid game. There's like no really good 1-drops to trigger this. Yeah, I just don't think it's good enough. It might see play just as a cheap body that you can play ahead of a Silesia to trigger it, but I really don't see this really doing anything long term. So yeah, 2 stars. Next up, we have the 55th Rifles. This is a 3-cost 1-up 3/4 with Guard Destruction. Gain 3 additional credits at the start of your next turn. This is a card I've really struggled to evaluate properly. Destruction is obviously like incredibly powerful, but you are kind of at the discretion of your opponent as to when it triggers. It's a big time suppression magnet, so this is like a key suppression target, but you're playing this on turn 3 is like the thing to remember. And it's got guards. You're forcing your opponent into it. So they need to have suppression. This is the suppression check of all suppression checks. We thought Kirkenes was a suppression check. No. 50-50 rifles is the suppression check. So yeah, it's the ability to play this unit on 3. And if your opponent kills it on turn 3, you untap your turn 4 with 7 credits. That is absolutely abhorrent. This has the ability to accelerate you so fast. Like, even if this dies on turn 5, you untap on turn 6 and you can just slam a front formation if you're in like a control mirror. And what's your opponent going to do? Just get hit for 5 every single turn for the rest of the game on for like from turn 6 on. So yeah, 55 rifles is a ridiculous destruction effect, and again, it does synergize with the Japanese destruction package, so this is another piece of that deck that might push it towards being playable. This dies on turn 3 from your opponent. You can then immediately ramp into your 6-drop guy and trigger like your Chika that died, and then this that died on your opponent's turn. So you can really do some crazy stuff with this. Also, important to note that it's 3 credits, which means you can play extra copies of this off of your Guards Naval, and it is a ground unit, which means your Illusion IL-10 can spawn more copies of this. Again, potentially relevant for the Destruction Effect deck. Yeah, this thing on paper reads crazy. I don't know if it's good enough to be 5 stars. So I have hedged a little bit, and I'm calling it 4 stars, but this may well be a 5-star card. Next up, we have the Tupolev Bomber. This is a 5-cost 2-op 3/4 with deployment. Add a I-16 Ishak on both sides of this unit. The Ishak is the 2-cost 2/1-op fighter. So this is another very, very interesting card, but primarily because it's a incredible stack bomb. This is 5 credits for 7/8 worth of stats across 3 aircraft bodies, which is like a lot, particularly when it's coming from like just a single card. This is like one of the best stats to like card ratio we've ever seen. The issue is exactly that. It's just stats. It's no keywords. It doesn't give you card advantage. It doesn't give you any like blitz. There's no keywords associated with this, so it's just raw stats. And I'm not sure if raw stats is good enough to see inclusion in a number of decks. This is potentially a reasonable mid-range card. But again, I don't know if the value proposition of just stats is good enough. I will say that this is likely going to see play in air because this and Blood Red Skies is just a combo. You can play this on 5, and then on turn 6 you can Blood Red Sky and just kill your opponent. It presents so much ludicrous damage that's very, very difficult to remove. So yeah, I suspect this will see play in air. The question is, it's whether or not it's going to see play outside of air in other decks. So I do think this is a 3-star card. I do think this will see play in air. I do think this will maybe reignite some interest in air, just because Blood Red Sky in this for 2 cards is a lethal threat. It just immediately. So yeah, I do think this is a very powerful card. I just don't know how good raw stats are in the current metagame. And finally, we have the Elite, and that is the People's Army. It's a 6-credit order. Fill your hand and support line with light infantry. Give them all blitz. Light infantry are 1-cost 0-op 1/1s with no effect. And this is like one of the most out of place cards in the set. They have over the last couple of rotations, they've been slowly gutting the last remnants of like the tokens deck from standard. So it's wild that they very suddenly print a token card into the format. So I'm guessing this is obviously set up for like one of the future expansions that they're doing, but it is very, very out of place in this set. I do think it's like slightly better than people are giving it credit for. It basically in the current format reads as 6 credit, deal 4 damage in the front line, and then like add 2 to 3 1 credit, deal 1 damage in the front line cards to your hand, which is like, I mean, like, is it amazing? No. Is it good? Probably not. But like, we'll probably see it from time to time in really weird control brews, I would imagine. But yeah, this is another very easy 2-star card. Probably, again, a setup for a future set, but one of the weirdest cards that they printed in this entire set. Next up, we have US, and we're starting off with standard, yet again, with the M2A4. So this is a 2-cost 1-op 2/3 tank, has blitz if it has 3 or more attack. So the M2A4 is like a really, really interesting card. It's a 2-credit 2/3 tank, which is like pretty vanilla as far as stats go. But it's a 2-credit unit in US, and being a 2 credit unit in US, it occupies a slot in the curve that's like really not contested at all in its own nation. So this will likely make its way into some deck just because it is a not unreasonable 2-drop in US. The Blitz clause on this is also like really easy to meet. Obviously pushing an M3 lead to the front line immediately meets this clause if it's in your deck because it gives everything in your deck +1 attack. But you also have things like For Freedom and USS Sullivans that you can play on this from hand. So you just play the M2A4 and then immediately hit with a buff and it can blitz straight away, which gives us quite a bit of flexibility in the big game, which is nice. But also you have cards outside of its nation like Type 93 in Japan, which synergize incredibly well with this. Just having a Type 93 on board and playing an M2A4 immediately makes it a 3/3 blitz tank, which is not unreasonable. Like it's a really, really good synergy, but the question is, do you really want to run like Japan US over Japan Germany or like Soviet ally or France ally? You know, it's probably not going to be good enough to see play outside of US, but in US it's probably fine. I just don't know if it's going to make the cut like immediately, because it does take a little bit of work to get the blitz out of it, and if you're playing it as just a vanilla 2/3, it's not the best. But again, it's a US 2-drop, so it's probably going to see some amount of play. So I'm going to give it 2 stars, but it may well be like a 3-star card. Next up, we have 1st Defense Battalion, and this is a card I actually previewed, so I get to talk about this a little bit more. So 1st Defense Battalion is a 1-cost 0-up 1/2 with Blitz and Bond. Deployment, get +1 attack if you have a US unit in the front line. Yeah, this is exactly what US like tempo and frontline have been dying for since 164 got rotated. Like I mentioned in the preview video, this is probably going to immediately slot into those decks. It's still not quite as good as like Combe or the new German 18th Infantry, but it's certainly going to see a ton of play in US main tempo. So it's exactly what like those US decks wanted to fight for a frontline early. Again, it's not great on turn 1, and it's got bonds. So you are taking a ping, but because US pretty much has no bond cards that you want to run in general, the bond damage is not going to really matter long term. Yeah, it's just a really, really good aggressive like / tempo body that US has really, really lacked since 164th got rotated. 4 stars. I almost forgot. Next up, we have 15th Engineers. This is a 5-cost 1-up 1/2 with infantry with deployment. Gain 1 extra credit slot for each unit in the front line. Your units gain equal amount of attack. So this is probably one of the most interesting cards of the set. 15's frontline condition being generic is like something I completely missed in the preview video. So it does make the card a lot better than I initially thought. There are 2 ways of playing this. It can be played proactively. So if you are playing, say, like I mentioned in the video, if you're playing like US Finland Air or US Finland Brewster, you can play this on your board with your Brewster's frontline. You will gain like 3 or 4 credit slots, and all your stuff will gain 3 or 4 attack, including the engineers, which is not nothing. But likewise, if your opponent has stuff in the front line and you play 15 engineers, you will gain however many credit slots that your opponent has units in the front line, plus your engineers or whatever else units you have in the support line will gain the attack as well. So this can come down as like a 3-4 or a 3-2 or a 4-2 that gains you 3 or 4 credit slots, which is not terrible. It has the ability to like massively accelerate you into your late game stabilizing tools if you're running them. The question is like, is it going to be good enough in ramp? Because ramp fell off a cliff when production order got rotated, and we don't really have that many big late game bombs that we want to ramp into right now. Like a lot of them have been rotated. Like mass deployment's gone. The Pershing is also gone. We only really have like the 8 credit order, make 6 credit worth of dudes in the front line. I can't remember what it's called now. Seaborne Invasion. There we go. But like, I don't know if it's going to be good enough, but I'm definitely going to be testing this out in some number of mid-range and like ramp/control decks. Something like US Italy, for example, I think might have room for this, but it's going to be exciting to see how it actually works. 3 stars. And finally for US, we have Surging Power. This is a 4-cost elite order. Give the top 4 units of your deck +1/+1, +2/+2, +3/+3, and +4/+4 respectively. Again, another interesting card for US. Again, as I mentioned in the reveal video, I think this is leaps and bounds ahead of the veg as far as like playable deck buff payoffs go. it's just a case of not knowing how good this is going to be in practice. +10/+10 to the top 4 units of your deck is like a ton of stats for not a lot of credits. It is a turn, like it's a tempo loss playing it, but you'll make up the tempo a lot quicker than you will with Victory Garden. But yeah, like you have to draw them, and US is a nation that doesn't have that much on-demand card draw. So it's a case of I need to be able to play with this to gauge how good it is, but I do think it's not that bad. Again, in certain decks like maybe US Italy, where you're playing a high density of blitz threats, things like the big matches, you're playing things like Hellcats, for example. Deck buff, like if you're playing US Italy ramp with like engineers and you're playing surging power and you surging power whatever, you play your engineers, you ramp to 17 million credits because your opponent's got a full front line or whatever, and you're not dead somehow, and you play it, you get like a big matchy off the top, and it's got +4/+4, and you're hitting your opponent for 9 from the support line, and you're feeling great about yourself. So yeah, I don't know. I think this card is potentially playable. It's just I need to play with it to really gauge how good it is, but for now I am calling it 3 stars. Alright, as we move on to the ally nations, we start with France, and France are receiving the Maginot Line. I'm glad this is actually finally getting represented in the game. The Maginot Line is a very, it's a very interesting piece of history. So yeah, the Maginot Line is a 3-credit order. Give target ground unit +3/+4 and cannot retreat or be suppressed. The Maginot is like a very powerful buff potentially. It's +1/+1 more than like supply shipment for an extra credit, but it also doesn't have the frontline stipulation of supply shipment, and it also has like extra upsides on top of it. And it's benefiting massively from being a French card, because France is probably the most played ally nation right now. So I'm expecting to see this make its way into a number of decks as a potential 2-of. It's a lot of stats like for a buff card that doesn't really have that big of a restriction on it being just ground units. Slapping this on like a blitz tank, slapping this on an infantry in the front line, slapping this on like an artillery or something. This, I think, is going to be a not uncommon inclusion in a number of decks, so I am giving it 3 stars. Next up, we have the Caproni CA133 from Italy. This is a 3-cost 2-op 2/3 bomber. Your HQ gets +2 defense when you deploy or add a unit. So the Caproni has like a very powerful effect. Legends had a card very similar to this. It was called Broomer Profiteer. It was a 2-cost 3/2 that whenever you summoned a creature, you would gain 1 life. And Profiteer saw play from the start of Legends to the very end. It was one of the best 2-drops in yellow. So like I'm well aware of how good this type of healing can be. It can win you games, particularly in like aggro mirrors or whatever. But I struggle to see what deck actively wants this card. Air, like Italy ally Air, cares a lot more about tempo than it does about healing, and control is going to rely a lot more on orders than it is on units for most of its effects. And like this is in the same nation as cards like Attacking the Colonies, which is much more consistent, much more consistent healing. Paying 4 to deal 3 and gain 5 is much better than paying 3 for 2/3 that might maybe on occasion gain you 2. So yeah, I just struggle to think of a deck where this fits in that's looking for this exact like set of stats, card type, and effect. So for that, I'm giving it 2 stars. Next up, we have 12th Yulan. This is for Poland. It's a 1-cost 1-op 3/1 infantry with Blitz and Fury. I've seen a lot of people making fun of this card. I think it's actually like, I think it's better than people think it is. I think there's a fringe chance that this sees some amount of play. Obviously a 3/1 is just bad stats. It's an infantry. It's got 1-op, which kills it as like an aggressive unit, because you have to play this after turn 1, which is like significantly worse. But there is like 1 or 2 places I think that can maybe make this work, but you're going to have to dedicate the deck to making it work. For example, I like Japan Poland maybe has a shot. Cards like Duty Bound are still in the format, as well as 24th Yulan being a 3/4 0-op blitzer for 3. So like there's a non-zero chance that Japan Poland can make like this aggressive / tempo deck kind of work. There's like it's a maybe, but like I'm definitely going to be trying it. It's not going to be good, but I'm going to be trying it. And there's also a chance that maybe some version of US Poland can make this work with the amount of buffs the deck is able to run. Things like Sullivan's for Freedom, Supply Shipment, for example. this can very quickly become a game-ending threat in the right circumstances, but the question is, like, will it happen often enough? Probably not. So similarly to Caproni, this is a 2-star card. It's mainly 2 stars because I'm going to be the one doing all the experimenting with it, so I know for a fact this is going to see some amount of play, but it's going to be entirely me. And finally, we have Finland, which is getting the White Guard. It's a 4-cost 1-up, 4/4 with Blitz and Guard. Unit stealth combat damage by this unit are destroyed. So Finland, once again, receives a kind of like insane card. This is a 4-cost 4/4, which is fine, but it also comes with the downside of having Blitz and Guard, naturally. So this slots into soup immediately. Blitz and Guard, 2 very, very good keywords to have, both defensive and proactive, able to take active trades into frontline, for example. But naturally, being Finnish, it has more text on it, so it has Death Touch from Magic. Essentially, this is the same line of text that's on like the CCs, for example, and it might seem bad being on like a 4/4. It might seem a bit unnecessary having Death Touch on a 4-attack unit, but I think it actually kind of makes it a little bit more flexible in the fact that you can play this on 4 or turn 5. You can like immediately swing into the small thing in the front line and then maybe force your opponent into a bad trade on their part, because this is just going to kill whatever hits anyway. So this is frequently going to be a 2-for-1 in a lot of cases. And also, it just acts as like a 5-credit destroy a thing in the front line, which is something that Finland hasn't always been able to do, and a lot of like Finnish decks struggled with just removing a big thing. So this is a pretty good way of doing it. The problem is it's a Finnish card, and Finland has a lot of very, very good cards, and you can only play 12 of them. So do I think this makes the cut in a lot of decks? Probably not. This might be good enough to see play in soup, but I'm not 100%. I do think this is going to see some amount of play somewhere. I just don't know where. Most likely soup, to be fair. But yeah, for that, I'm going to give it 3 stars. And with that, that is the entirety of Early War. Yeah, I tried to keep this super concise as I am on a time crunch, as I mentioned. I don't know if I'll have time to edit the star things in, but hopefully with the next set I will have a little bit more time to do it. I do intend on coming back towards the end of the expansion cycle to see how correct or how incorrect I was on a number of these. That is why I'm giving them star ratings, so I can at least come back and laugh at myself when when the Pounder Mark 1 ends up being the best card of the set. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought. If you think I have given some of these cards terrible ratings or ratings that they did not deserve. But yeah, make sure to comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll catch you in the next one. I will hopefully be streaming on release day. Ideally, this video comes out before release day, but there's a chance it comes out on day of release. I'm not 100% sure. Again, super time crunched. But yeah, all that aside, again, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, yada, yada, yada. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.